Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. The role of heritage in the island, the decision to put the debate over public sector pension reforms on hold, and health and social care services into the future were some of the topics discussed this week. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Is delaying the debate over public sector pension reforms a sensible decision? The Vice Chair of the Public Sector Pensions Authority says while he was reluctant to delay the debate, he feels it was the right thing to do. The issue, which is widely viewed as one of the most critical facing government, was due to be debated in this week's sitting of Tynwald, but it's now been deferred to the June sitting. But Michael MHK Alfred Cannon was unhappy with the move. Mr Cannon put forward an urgent motion which would have seen the establishment of an independent review commission to review the options for reform. But the court didn't vote in favour of debating that. Is the 2-month delay a sensible move? Should politicians be given more time to ask questions before the debate itself actually takes place? Or is the delay in getting political backing or otherwise for reform unhelpful? First contribution says a lot of our current MHKs have been there 20 to 30 years. This issue has been obvious for years. Why have they sat on their hands all this time? This from Alan, he says, this decision just about sums this Tynwald up. Too much talk, never enough action. All they seem to have done is argue and point score for 5 years with far too much grandstanding all round. Let's hope we get some people in next time who are prepared to get something done for a change, because I despair at all this lot. Right then, Bob says, of course they should have more time to discuss it. A lot of people think that these changes are just a fudge that they're trying to push through. Unless they stop all this for newcomers, they're not going to improve anything. Sooner they put the scheme out to the private sector, the better. I don't think that they could, Bob. I'm certainly no expert on pensions, but my understanding is, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that most private sector pensions were actually a fund that you paid into, and they then invested that money. So they put all the money together that was coming in each week or month or whatever, and they invested that in the stock markets. I think the pension firms were some of the biggest investors in the stock exchange, with the idea that they were going to sort of grow that amount of money and give people a good return on it when they retired. But the money was actually put to one side. My understanding is that the government scheme, or the public sector scheme, certainly here in the Isle of Man, isn't that. So what people are paying now towards pensions is actually going straight out the door to pay people who are in receipt of pensions. So there's no sort of fund as such. So I don't think it is something that you could put out to the private sector and run it that way, because there's no pot of gold for the private sector to invest. That's my understanding of it. Like I say, I might be completely wrong, in which case feel free to put me right about it. But I don't know that there's anything that they could do about that, apart from what they're suggesting, which is to make people pay more for longer and get less out at the end of it. James Corley said, this issue incenses me. They say that they haven't got an answer, but the answer's simple. People who are retired and benefiting from the scheme should be putting money back in. They created the problem, they should help to solve it. Well, I don't know if that's true, actually. I mean, if you join an occupational pension scheme, then you've not created it, have you? There are 8,000 public sector workers, but 80,000 people in the island have to cover the cost. In the past, wages were low, but the pension was good. But the wages have come up now, and the pension hasn't been adjusted. That's a fair point. The ones who've retired ought to be paying in. They're benefiting. It's affecting the Isle of Man. They should sort it out themselves instead of putting the problem at other people's door. Civil servants think that they're entitled, not just here, but worldwide. Just look at Greece. It'll bankrupt us. The Isle of Man needs to be vibrant. It needs the economy to grow, so tax revenue goes up. But they're pulling money from all sectors to fund pensions. Well, yeah, and the thing that bothers me is that they're talking about 25% of economic growth is going to go to fund the pensions as well, presuming that there is that sort of economic growth. Those who created the problem and are benefiting ought to be paying back in. Okay. Stu, Examiner 2003, Guernsey 4,074 public sector workers, Jersey 5,514, Isle of Man 8,500. They were told and the public ignored as usual. These figures say it all, says Doug. Government employee pensions, the MHKs haven't sat on their hands at all. They've positively encouraged and approved the situation. This all didn't happen secretly behind their backs. Right then. Alf Cannon is right. These top politicians are trying to fend off any decisions yet again. I'd like to know how many retire in this 2-month wait. How are they going to get paid when we're bankrupt, or will they be on us in Australia, says Dave. Stu, public sector pensions, this is a proper one for the consultants. Tell them what you want to find, then pay them handsomely to take all the flack, which is tax pensions over state pensions to the hilt. Stu, I personally think this is the most sensible decision they've made in this whole debacle. It's a huge issue and cannot be fixed with a knee-jerk reaction. Judging by some of you callers, they think everybody in the scheme is a politician or high-ranking civil servant, but they're not. Some highly skilled people, nurses, doctors, police, civil engineers, etc. We really can't afford to lose them because of foolhardy decisions, says Jan. Hey boy, 8,500 government workers, 1,000 workers, 7,500 chair polishers. Facts? Says Frank. No, opinion, Frank. Opinion. Remember, there's a difference. I got taxed on my lump sum from money that I'd saved myself, but government workers get a tax-free lump sum that I put into. Work that out. Hang on, I got taxed on a lump sum from money I saved myself. Well, surely that was money that you'd already paid tax on. You'd pay tax on. I don't know, is the answer. There would be no scheme without the people who have and continue to pay into it. Were your last contributors seriously suggesting that except for a few politicians, retirees are getting free money? No wonder we're in trouble. Right, okay, thank you.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
What role does heritage play in the island today? Many sites managed by Manx National Heritage opened their doors to the public for the 2016 season, get my teeth in, at the end of last month. But what does this year have in store for local residents and visitors to the island? To discuss the 2016 season for MNH and the role of heritage in the island, we're joined now by Director Edmund Southworth. Good afternoon, Edmund, and thanks for coming onto the programme today.
Fast and good afternoon, Stu.
Always good to see you. So, yes, heritage. I mean, people constantly talk about, whenever we talk about things like horse trams or whatever, people bring out and play the card about, well, it's essential to our heritage, and, you know, people aren't going to come to the Isle of Man unless we've got lots of heritage. Is that the truth, or is it something that we're looking after more for the benefit of local residents?
Well, it's impossible to have both, of course. I've just come through our library on the way to the studio here, and it's full of people, and they're local people, and the people who are to lecture in our facilities are local people, and by and large the people having lunch were local people.
Yeah.
The fact that we are attracting new people coming to the island on holiday, visiting the friends and relatives, is great, and it runs in parallel. Without those visitors coming in, we wouldn't be able to afford all the facilities we provide for local people. So it does work together.
Well, like everybody else in the Isle of Man, you're working under sort of budgetary constraints. Last time we spoke, I think we were talking about somewhere that was a little bit run down. I think it was the House of Manannan, and you were saying that you wish you had a lot more money to renew some of the exhibits there. Is that still the case? Are you still trying to sort of, make do and mend?
Well, I think what we're doing is working smarter. We have actually been able to invest some money in the House of Manannan over the last few months of last year. And for many people, they will see a new gallery, which is sparkling clean. Half the money came from our friends. So half the money was actually a charitable donation to the organisation. And many people forget we're a charity. We probably spent something like £250,000 last year of charitable funding on top of the government funding. Yeah,
okay. And so it must be difficult to make ends meet, though, because you've got a lot of sites, haven't you?
It's quite tight. The island has an enormous heritage, and there are the sites that are generating income, like the House of Manannan, like Castle Rushen, but also sites like St Michael's Isle, Macklebrew, the places that you can wander in, and they're great value for money because there's no way of spending any money.
How do people find out about these things, though? I mean, do you have literature, or it's just, you mentioned coming through the library. When I very first moved to the island, I used the library to research a relative that lived here in the 60s, looked through old newspapers and microfiches and things like that. And it's one of those things that unless you kind of know it's there, I wonder how many people who live here don't realise the number of facilities that are available to them.
I think it's a constant battle to remind people that things are still there. And you walk past Castle Rushen, which has been here for over 800 years, and gradually people forget it's there. And actually, it's well worth a visit, even if it's something you've been going every few years. What we find often is that people go as a child, they go as an adult once or twice, and then they go with their grandchildren.
Because
there's a life cycle of museum visiting.
Well, while you're talking about Castle Rushen, I've got to pull you up on this now. So it's good enough for visitors, but it's not good enough for the next Lieutenant Governor. What went wrong there that you couldn't have the ceremony at Castle Rushen?
I don't think anything went wrong. I think there was a number of circumstances that meant that when the committee that looked at this, and it wasn't our decision, they looked at a number of factors. How many people could they get in? I think the court's option that they're using in Douglas will allow a lot more people to go than were previously able to go. And the room that was used was up one flight of stairs. There was no disabled access. The fire evacuation was not what I would have certainly liked it to have been. And, on balance...
you think it was a pragmatic decision?
It was a decision based on a number of factors, including the fact that the swearing-in ceremony usually takes place in a court of law.
Yeah.
And that building has not been used as a court now for something like 4 or 5 years.
It's a shame, though, isn't it? I mean, you would think that we ought to be able to use our heritage, especially for ceremonial events like this.
I think that's right. On the other hand, it's a public ceremony, and you want as many people who can possibly go as you can. Otherwise, I think it would have been only a very small number.
Yeah.
And I remember the last one, and we were packed in a very small and uncomfortable space. It was not ideal.
All right, so let's have a look. I suppose that you run through the season, and then the winter time you take stock and you repair things and you upgrade things or whatever. What have you been working on this winter particularly?
I think we've done some quite complicated structural work at Castle Rushen. One of the examples, we've got a lot of damp penetrating through the walls, and we've been refurbishing an area in front of Derby House. The scaffolding's gone up now on the old House of Keys, and we're just doing the external redecoration. It's a very hostile environment, and the woodwork needs repainting fairly frequently. What people will see that's new is a new gallery in the Manx Museum. One of the stories we've been running is the great deer, or the elk, which was originally in Castle Rushen, and we have cleaned it. We've used some quite modern laser cleaning to take off the dirt of 130 years, I think, and that will feature as part of a new gallery about the environment before humans.
Wow.
And so there's lots of geological specimens. No dinosaurs, I'm afraid.
Laser cleaning. I'm interested in the tech there rather than the heritage. So laser cleaning. How do you use lasers to clean things?
It's a very narrowly focused laser, and it literally burns off the dirt. Because of the frequency of the light, when it reaches the lighter coloured bone, it stops.
Oh, right.
It reacts with the dark, and so it does no harm at all to the object.
I've heard of ultrasonic cleaning. I think they use that for jewellery and stuff, don't they?
Yeah. It's a different type of technology. It actually burns off dirt.
Yeah, it sounds a good idea. Okay, so in terms of new things then, a new gallery at the museum.
And there's a new gallery at the House of Manannan came on stream just before Christmas. That's talking about the Kingdom of Man and the Isles, which is a very odd period of history when the island was ruled by the Norse, and the Norse king was based here with his empire, as it were, or kingdom, being a seaborne kingdom. So it was the islands of Islay, Jura, Lewis and Harris, and so on, but very, very much based here on the island. So the House of Manannan, it gives people an impression of what royalty might have been like. So there's a very nice throne to sit on.
We're talking about heritage and its part in the visitor economy. So I asked you earlier on about how we sell the assets that you've got effectively. I mean, do you sell it to a wider audience than just the people in the Isle of Man and through the occasional sort of leaflet or brochure or whatever?
Yeah, we work very closely with our partners in the government, in economic development, the tourism people, and our friends in Isle of Man Railways. And we go out together, whether sometimes that's a trade fair, or we actually go out and talk to individual wholesalers who are working, to sell the island. Yeah. What many people don't realise is if you book a holiday, quite often there is a wholesaler who has packaged it together.
I see.
And there's a group of us who work very closely with the hotels on the island, the steam packet company, railways, and we target people and we say, why don't you sell the island?
Yeah.
So that's quite intensive, but when it works, it delivers significant numbers of people,
Right.
And they're doing the marketing for you.
Yeah,
You don't have to
I
spend
sometimes.
a lot of
I mean,
money.
when we talk about tourism, and people say, "Well, we've got a place which is absolutely unique because of our hills and vales and all the rest," and I question that. I don't know whether or not we are unique. I mean, we've got bits of the Lake District, bits of North Wales here in terms of geologically, I suppose, but in terms of heritage, are there many things that are uniquely Manx?
I think the combination of things is unique. There's no doubt about it. The density of archaeological remains here, the number of things per square mile is greater than many places. Indeed, the depth of that and the fact that it's not the Romans but it's the Norse is different. But also that goes right the way through to World War I, World War II, where our story is different from other people's stories. And the fact that that's backed up by an international aspect, so we can talk about our role and the role that Manx people played around the world, whether it's Southern Africa in mining or going out to the Americas, that is different from, say, the Lake District.
Yes.
So I think that the fact that we have an unusual history, which is, we are not part of the United Kingdom. Our taxation in the 18th century, brought about an incredible story, and the revestment, the purchase, by the United Kingdom of the island in an attempt to clamp down on offshore taxes.
Yeah.
That sounds very familiar,
Nothing
doesn't
new.
it?
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I mean, we'll tend to think, all of us who live here tend to think that we know plenty about the island, but actually in detail, I don't know whether or not it's just me or whether or not other people maybe don't know an awful lot about things. My eldest daughter is a teacher, and she sent me a message the other day on Facebook and said, "What do you know about internment on the Isle of Man during World War I? Because I've got a class to teach about it." And I realised that I didn't know very much at all. I probably know a bit more about World War II internment, but World War I internment, was that Knockalo? Was that
Knockalo and Douglas? There were two camps initially. The camp at Douglas, and then the purpose-built one at Knockalo. There was a major incident where a number of prisoners were killed in a struggle at Douglas, and they accelerated the development of Knockalo. We're putting new stuff out all the time. There are new discoveries being made. I mean, one of the things we've been doing recently through the Eye Museum, putting out records, putting individual photographs. So we have a lot of people who are coming to the island, either physically or virtually.
Yes.
Researching their family tree, and a lot of people of German origin are now asking the questions. Where was my great grandfather?
I would have thought that would be a growing market, because there's a real interest in that kind of fairly recent history, isn't there? I mean,
there
you
is
look at the
indeed.
battlefield tours that they do in Normandy, for example.
And we see that coming. There's plenty of evidence that people research using the Eye Museum and then organise a visit to the island.
Well, that's the ideal, isn't it?
And there's plenty of evidence for that. It's not enormous numbers, but we probably couldn't cope with enormous numbers.
Right.
But what those people do is in some cases, it's a holiday of a lifetime. They spend time. They go around, look at the places where their ancestors came from. And I think that's very important. There's not just the Manx diaspora, but also the interment history, which is unique.
Okay.
And our documentation, I think, helps with it.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should Manx be included as a nationality on future census forms? A petition calling for changes to the island's census has been set up. With people unhappy at being British rather than Manx, the petition's gathered almost 400 signatures. The government says anybody who's Manx should put British on the forms, which will be collected on census night on Sunday. Sarah McGinn set up the petition after receiving her interim census form. So, should Manx be an option when it comes to nationality? Or does it make more sense for those living in the island to be classed as British? Hello, with reference to the census, it's Manx-based based only, so should have the option for Manx-born, as heritage also includes persons, and at present our Manxness is becoming very grey. That's from Mark in Douglas. The Manx are categorised as British. When looking at the census for 2011, the resident population by place of birth for Isle of Man was 40,655. Both EU and non-EU countries only total 2,418, yet 3 European countries are being listed in the census, but not Manx. Fair point. Alan called. I've lived in the Isle of Man since I was 3.5, and I would be glad to call myself Manx, but I have to call myself British because I was born in England. Well, if you think Manx, then you are Manx as far as I'm concerned. Plenty of people who disagree. I think that, if your parents came here on holiday and your grandparents knew where the Isle of Man was, then you can call yourself Manx. Most importantly, where are the children in this census? Yeah, I'm surprised that that's not on there, to be honest. It's only people aged 16 and over, isn't it? Stu, totally get this census if we were self-reliant, a self-sustaining island and government, but we're not. If the boat doesn't go, we're stuck. Also, I was stuck in an airport a couple of years ago while they Googled confirmed that the Isle of Man actually existed, and I wasn't making it up. I think we've a long way to go for world recognition. That from Diana in Douglas. Stu, I simply can't believe all the fuss about one little sentence on the census when there's people injured and dead from the earthquakes and terrorist activity, or are people not bothered because it's not here on the island? Are the population aware that once 24th April has been and gone, then the census information's out of date, especially if a child is born or somebody passes away? Isn't it time that people got a grip? Asks Pip. I couldn't possibly suggest that, Pip. Just do what I'm doing and use the other box and sign it as Manx. Okay, well, that is the option, isn't it? If our nationality isn't Manx, then what's the point of Tynwald Day, MHKs, Manx flags, etc.? Besides, if we were really British, the roadworks in Ramsey would have been finished months ago. Really, really fed up motorist. Well, that kind of puts it into perspective. Just print Manx alongside British, job done, says JC, or in the other box if you wanted to. I think there could be problems defining who is Manx. Isn't it that you've got both parents are Manx, and you've got and both sets of grandparents are Isle of Man people? I think that's the legal definition. People born here to foreign parents are not Manx. People with a long Manx heritage on both sides who were born elsewhere but who returned and grew up here are Manx. Just being born here doesn't make you Manx. Right, I blame the come-overs myself. Is this a way of disguising the fact that Manx people are in a minority in the land of their birth? I don't know. Do you think that that's what it is? Do you think the government have got some sort of nefarious purpose behind this? I don't know. I think that the fact is that technically and legally, whether you're born in the Isle of Man of Manx parentage and lineage or not, you are classified internationally as being British. And I think it's as simple as that, to be honest. I don't think there's any skulking in back rooms going on to try and disguise anything. But what do I know? Hi, Stuart. What's the problem? We could have the British TT, Britwald. Welcome to the Isle of Britain. I'd rather be an other than English. Just more Manx dilution by this penny-pinching government. And that's from a Manxman. Okay. There are more things to be concerned about than our nationality on a census form. For example, the Manx going on holiday using a Manx passport not recognised in many EU or worldwide countries. If we take ill in any EU country, we have to pay huge hospital bills if insurance companies refuse to pay out. Repatriation costs, should anyone die, can cost up to £25,000 to fly a body back to the Isle of Man. To the UK, same if we suffer a stroke or are unable to walk. These are the areas which people should be more concerned about. As far as many countries are concerned, being Manx can be a curse. We're like aliens, says Michael. I think that's a bit strong, to be honest. What else? The Isle of Man will do as it's told by number 10. End of story. British, simple as that, from Jerry. Well, remember, this is a Manx government census form. It's not a British government census form. It's a Manx thing. So I don't know that number 10's got any say in it, to be honest. Try putting Manx as your nationality when entering a country such as Mexico on your holiday. You'll soon find it's quicker and easier to put British, says David. Yep. Elaine called. I think it's regrettable that Manx isn't listed as a nationality on the census form. Filipino is. Why is that given more status than Manx? People should be proud of their ancestry. I was born in Hampshire, so I'm not Manx, but those who are should be proud of their Manx identity. Okay. Hey boy, easy on the comments. You'll upset these half Manx, half Scouse would be if they could be's. Facts from Frank. Oh, rarely facts from Frank. Who's going to entertain us now in Tynwald as Mr. Cameron's not standing for re-election? It may be a real shake-up come September with 2 MHKs already standing down. How many more? Asks Alan. What does Phil Gorn have to say for getting airtime on Manx Radio nearly as much as Bell? Amazing, quite on this. Head of Culture Vannin constantly beating separate country drum. Interesting, says Jack. Okay, well, you'll be reassured to know that when you eventually elect, and it's inevitable that you'll do it at some point because it will be the least bad option. When you elect me as benevolent dictator for life, then I'm going to have a citizenship ceremony, and anybody can do it. You know, you need to take lessons in not pronouncing RAT and things like that. And if you pass, then we're going to have a citizenship ceremony down at Hango Hill, where you stand on an old fish crate with on one leg, and you pledge your allegiance to the Manx flag. Simple as that. So anybody can be Manx that wants to be. It's whether or not you want to be, isn't it? Census. I feel more strongly over Tynwald not going for an independent committee to consider ways to deal with the public sector pension disaster that's due to hit us shortly. Tynwald action is a disgrace. Sylvia called. That lady should get a copy of Protocol 3. I presume you're talking about the lady who's got the petition going. In Article 6, it's defined as nationality. If you're born on the island, your parents were born on the island, at least one grandparent was also born in the Isle of Man, then you're Manx and you can't work in the EU. Manx census, if our government won't recognise us as a nation, how can we expect others to? Words fail me, says Michelle. I reckon we should all put our nationality down as yes, so that would confuse the government. Alan called. I was proud to be associated with the Manx Regiment during the Second World War. There are only 4 of us left out of 600. We're all proud to be associated with the regiment. Stu, the fact of the matter is, as Peter would say, I'm going to miss that, there's a nationality heading for Irish because they wouldn't dare ask the Southern Irish to tick British, even though Ireland forms part of the British Isles on an atlas, as does the Isle of Man. So we should be afforded a nationality too as an independently governed land, says Ali. And finally, Mr. Bell should check out the dictionary definition or Google it. Interestingly, I've looked at states that the UK itself is made up of 4 nations: English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish. Nothing about the British nation. I remember Mr. Bell saying that we were not a nation according to the EU definition of nation. Well, Mr. Bell, we're not in the EU, or are we?
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
The National Health Service in the Isle of Man could be subject to a name change if legislation currently progressing through the branches of Tynwald is passed unhindered. The National Health and Care Service Bill is due to have its 3rd reading in the House of Keys next Tuesday. But just what implications will the change in legislation have to the care that's delivered and how it's rolled out? To explain the changes and thinking behind them, we're joined in the studio now by Health and Social Care Minister Howard Quayle and DHSC Chief Executive Malcolm Couch. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thanks for coming in today.
Afternoon, Stu.
So, Minister, I mean, a lot of people would say this is just government messing about doing easy things like changing the stationery, when actually there are much more important things to address. And you're the person that's, I'm sure, absolutely aware of the more important things.
Yeah, and it's not. This new bill is good news. It's modernising our legislation. It's recognising the fact that we've merged health and social care together. But it does quite a few things. First of all, it's more enabling legislation. So at the moment, if I want to do new legislation to react to a change in the way we do healthcare or social care, I have to go and get legislation drawn up. I then have to queue with other departments to try and get my legislation through. I have to take it through Keys and then Tynwald, and it can take 2 to 3 years to react, whereas this is enabling legislation, and all that happens then is we draw up a scheme for a change, we go out to consultation with the public, we then take it, having consulted with the public, to Tynwald. When Tynwald approves it, then bang, we can go straight in and enact the changes that we're proposing. So that's good. Also, we're bringing in for the very first time for the Isle of Man a patient charter. It'll be very similar to the NHS charter in the United Kingdom. We'll be going out to consult on it, to see what the people of the Isle of Man would like in their charter. But that is an absolute first. And another area, we have some of our buildings which aren't being fully utilised. So I'm wanting to sweat the assets effectively. And I'll give you an example. Ramsey District Cottage Hospital has a fantastic theatre down there. It costs an awful lot of money to maintain it, whether we use it for 1 hour a year or 30 hours a week sort of thing. And this will enable us to go out and hire out the theatre in Ramsey, for example, or other facilities if they're not being utilised. Now, it can't be at the expense of the health service, but if we can bring in additional monies to cover the basic costs, the fixed costs, then that then frees up money to do other things. So there's quite a number of really good news items in this bill.
So, well, really what you're doing is that you're changing the ground rules, you're changing the rules of engagement, aren't you?
Yeah.
Are patients going to see any benefit from that? Because it might make it easier for you to do the job, but are patients going to see any difference? They're still going to be seen by the same people, whether it's in health or social care, surely.
Well, patients will see two things. They will know what to expect. They will have their own charter on what they have a right to happen to them when they're in one of our facilities. But also, I don't have a blank cheque, Stu. When we're running the department, we have to live within our means, and therefore people constantly say, please can you reduce the waiting times at A&E, please can you do more cover for stroke patients, and the list is endless. And if you were to win the Euro Millions today, Stu, and give me 10 million a year, I could spend it quite comfortably, just with the demands I've already got on me. I therefore haven't got that 10 million, but we need to make improvements. So if we can bring in some additional bits of income and become more efficient, then that means we can put money into areas where we know we've got issues, where we need to improve the service, but we just haven't got the funds.
Gotcha. Well, Malcolm Couch, you've been brought in as Chief Executive of the department after a long and distinguished career in sort of finance, in Treasury. So is that your primary focus? Is it looking at the finance? Because I think you're a medical doctor primarily, aren't you, rather than a doctor of numbers? Am I right?
Being modest about it, I'm a double doctor.
Oh.
Original career was medicine, but I did a PhD as well.
Right, because people would think, coming from Treasury, that it would be a sort of a professional qualification, but you're a medical doctor as well, so you can see both sides of it. So, I mean, is that your brief almost? Is it to look at the numbers to make sure that you're getting the best out of the budget that you've got?
I think as Chief Executive, and the Minister and I sort of made this clear when we did the public road shows earlier this year, I've got three priorities. Above all is the experience of our patients and service users. We've got to take their views into account far more, bring them into the picture. But I think that the second one that you're mentioning there is cost effectiveness. We're spending, Tynwald has given us over £250 million of the country's money to spend this year. And that's an enormously humbling task. So we've got to be able to say, we know where we're spending it, we know what we're spending it on, and that we're spending it effectively. And then the other key feature I've got, because there are patches of really quite low morale in the department, so my other third key thing is my colleagues. I've got to work with them and make them happier, more motivated, better trained, etc. And that will deliver benefits for our customers, if you will, and so you then get a virtuous circle.
Right, okay. Minister, Health and Social Care, they feel on the face of it to be naturally coexisting sort of things. You're looking after people holistically, I'm guessing, if you combine health and social care. Is that the case, or are there differences between the two disciplines?
Well, there are differences, but they work. If you're taken ill in hospital and you're, let's say, as an example, you're an elderly person that has a fall, you go into hospital where we fix the bones or whatever the treatment's needed. You then have a journey to get you home, and that journey should be seamless. Adult social care look after you at home to ensure that is your house ready for you to go home? Do you have raised chairs? Is the steps into your house? Are the toilet facilities right, etc.? And if we can have a seamless journey for a person who's ill, they go into hospital and then they go back to the community, the smoother that we can make that journey without having to stay in Noble's Hospital for a week whilst we're waiting for alterations to be done to your house, which will enable you to live in your house safely. If we can cut that out and work together, and I think historically when you've had two different departments, you've had two different budgets, and it's a case of that's mine. I'm not giving it to you to help you. This is mine.
Silo mentality.
And as a result of merging the two departments together, it's getting people to work as one team.
Let's go to the lines, and we've got our first caller on, and it's Alistair. Hello, Alistair.
I was in my doctor's surgery last week, and I just happened to notice on the wall was a notice that said, stating that last month there was 105 people didn't turn up for an appointment.
Yeah.
Now, I personally think the time has come, and I know there'll be a lot of talk about it, but the time has come when I think that we should be paying a small amount to go and see the doctor.
So that people will take the appointment more seriously.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even if it was £10, I mean, I've seen this system in France, and I believe they have it in Southern Ireland as well. And what it does is, I mean, people on benefits, they have a card so that they don't have to pay.
Yeah.
And there are other people, like children, things like that. Understandable. But in the main, I think people should be paying £10 to go and see the doctor, because it has two things. What it does is, it keeps a lot of people away that don't need to be there. And secondly, it gives the doctor more time to consult with the people that have the real problems.
Of course, yeah. Well, it certainly sounds a good idea to me, Alistair. Minister, you got any thoughts on that? I bet you like the idea of taking £10 off everybody, don't you?
Well, actually, when we did the 5 road shows round the island, it was one of my pet topics that I asked, because I'm really incensed that we have so many DNAs in the GP surgery, because if you don't attend, then your neighbour who's maybe sick, who rang up, a couple of hours later than you, might have to wait till the following day. So I asked the public, would they be prepared to introduce as a start anyway, a fine system? If you go to your dentist and you don't turn up on time, you pay about £20 at least for not attending. And so I just asked for a show of hand or feedback from the audiences there at every one of the 5 road shows. And in some, it was about 2/3, in others, it was virtually 100% support for a fine system to be brought in for people who couldn't be bothered to cancel. Now, it's very easy to make an appointment, not make an appointment, but it's easy to cancel an appointment. But we'd looked at other ways of making it even easier. So do we have just a dedicated line where you can... It's purely for cancelling appointments, because I know some people have said, well, I've tried to cancel appointments, but I've tried to ring my phone just rings out, or it's constantly engaged. So as long as we come up with a system where, whether it's on the internet and you can just email, I can no longer make this appointment, or I don't need the doctor anymore, I'm feeling much better, or a mobile text, then the cost really is a few pennies to cancel an appointment.
The flip side to this, of course, being fair about it, is that a lot of people are complaining about how long it takes to get an appointment. So whether or not the cynic in me suggests that this might be a furtive plan whereby people phone up, they're given an appointment in a week, by which time they're actually feeling better and they don't need to go to the doctors anyway. But, I mean, I would always phone up and cancel the appointment. It appears that some people aren't doing.
Well, they're not, and as I say, that's why and it's over 100 in for the month in a GP surgery. So you times that by the number of GP surgeries we've got on the island, which I think is 12, and that's an awful lot of waste time for our doctors.
But is it? I mean, I've been to the doctors a few times, and usually you kept waiting. You're not seen on time. So if a few people ahead of me in the queue just don't turn up, then at least that gets them back on schedule, doesn't it?
Well, we're never going to get the 150 or whatever it is down to 0. So, yes, 10 or 15 might give the GPs the time to read the files from the next person. But equally, you've got emergency cases when people ring up seriously feeling under the weather. If we didn't have such, people not turning up, then we'd be able to get those squeezed in quicker. All
right, I think that answers Alistair's question. Thanks for calling, Alistair. It sounds like privatisation hiring out theatres, so who gets priority, the NHS patient or the private patient in what are NHS facilities, says Derek.
It's always going to be the NHS, and our theatres at Nobles Hospital are absolutely flat out. But that we do have capacity. I gave Ramsey District Cottage Hospital as an example because the theatre there isn't flat out. And if it's sitting there not being utilised for part of the week, then surely if we can get some additional funds in to help with the fixed costs, because it has to be inspected and maintained to a certain standard, all the time, then surely that's got to be a great help. So it's not privatisation, it's just trying to sweat your assets, I suppose.
Well, and talking about that, a question from Jane, and she says, do we really need Ramsey Cottage Hospital? I can hear people in Ramsey shouting down the radio at that one, but she said, if we need a hospital in the north, why don't we have one in the south as well? And surely everything should be done at Nobles. Was that the political decision years ago to build a super hospital at Nobles there that would serve the whole island?
No, I think we're looking at care hubs now throughout the whole of the island, and I think Ramsey District Cottage Hospital covers the north very well. We've got good facilities in Port Erin, which can be expanded. We've got Southlands, the Doctor's Surgery and Tyrosson there, all close together. I think Ramsey District Cottage Hospital offers a fantastic facility. There's very good morale of the staff there, and we can certainly use it more to, I think it costs around £3.5 to £4 million a year, but we can improve the usage of it and do more in the community there.
Okay. Going forward, could Minister Quayle say how many employees were given a new job title and or pay rise during the rebranding?
Well, this happened 2 years ago when we merged, because this isn't a rebranding exercise, what we're doing now. When we merged the department, we actually decreased the number of managers, because obviously when you have two departments, you have two chief executives. So we went from two chief executives down to one, and we did lose other senior management posts, and we expected some of our senior management to step up to take more responsibility for no additional funding.
Right, okay. Let's go back to the lines. We've got John on who's got a question. Hello, John.
Hi, Stu. As you know, I've been involved with the Department of Social Care in regard to our family member who's got a severe learning disability for many, many years on various committees. And the thing I've consistently found is the disparity between the knowledge of the senior management and the knowledge and expertise of those at the sharp end of the service. And from talking to those at the sharp end of the service, consistently get the same message that, well, we know what's needed, but the management don't really see. Now, some years ago, on virtually the last meeting of the Learning Disability Consultative Group, I made a suggestion that senior management spent at least one day a month, going to the sharp end and actually working, to see with alongside, their staff to see just exactly what the true situation was.
All right. Well, let's put that question then to Malcolm Couch. Malcolm, you're a management person. You're also medically qualified. We found that out at the top of the show. But is there a disconnect between the people who are making the decisions and administering the health service and those who, as John said, are at the sharp end?
I think to start with, there always will be. If we hear what the Minister was saying a few minutes ago, that my group of colleagues is about 3,500 people. So it's actually impossible for me to know everything that's going on in all places. So I think that's one point. I've been in post now for almost 10 months, and in that 10 months I've been going around the department assiduously, seeing frontline teams, talking to them, find out what's going on. I've been seeing unbelievable numbers of charitable organisations, etc., people who use our services, their carers, etc. So I am getting a very good picture of what's going on. And I think that in terms of people with learning disabilities, whether they're young people or adults, we know there are some gaps. There's no doubt whatsoever. So I'm not disagreeing with what the caller's saying. The question then we have to do, and this comes back to, we're publishing today our service delivery plan, which covers both this year, the 2016-17 financial year, but it's also setting out our first steps on the 5-year strategy, which was approved by Tynwald in October last year. And the key thing there is one of the first goals is to understand the needs of the Isle of Man community, because I can't build services unless we actually know what's going on. And I think that will then bridge the gap between me as a senior leader and my colleagues who deliver services to the people that John knows. And then we plan properly. But we can't do it in a sort of a higgledy-piggledy way at all.
Well, I would imagine that there's a limited benefit actually in having an accountant, for example, working in A&E for a day. I take his point, but there's only so much in terms of crossover of skills, isn't there? Okay, thank you for your call, John.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
should there be a change in the drink-drive limit? It's something that's been mooted here in the island only recently, and it's up for discussion across the water too. Emergency service leaders are calling for a reduction in the drink-drive limit in England and Wales. They want it brought into line with Scotland, where it was reduced to 50 milligrams of alcohol per 100 millilitres of blood. The issue is due to be discussed in the House of Lords today. Representatives from the police, ambulance and fire services have written a letter to the Transport Secretary, Patrick McLaughlin. Is a change to the drink-drive limit something that you'd welcome in the Isle of Man, or should it stay exactly as it is? Frank says, now then, my little Eccles cake, the drink-drive limit should be 0. And he goes on, but I'm not going to read the rest of it. And somebody else says, I think no drink at all if you drive or ride. Then everybody knows, says Chris. Yeah, that's a valid point. I think that there'd have to be an allowance. I mean, let's face it, if you go out and somebody buys you a nice lunch and it's something that's been cooked in wine or something like that, or you have a piece of sherry trifle, I don't think it means that you're impaired because you've had too much booze in your system. Or, I mean, I think that there are certain medicines and things that have got an amount of alcohol in them. So you'd have to allow a trace, I suppose. But if you wanted a 0 limit, then, yeah, as long as they allowed a certain trace for examples like that, then I think that would probably be okay. But is it what we want? I mean, it would effectively close down a lot of pubs and things if there was an absolutely 0 limit. Do you think that the case is strong enough to warrant that? Do you think that the pubs have had it their own way for far too long? PC nanny state gone mad as usual will do nothing to stop the idiots who drive after a skinful, says John. I think you're probably right. If 1 in 6 driving deaths are caused by a drink, then 5 in 6 aren't. So what will they do? What will they ban next to stop these? Says a different John. Stu, whatever the drink drive limit, I think it should be standardised to avoid confusion. Also, I'm against zero tolerance because it may unfairly penalise those on medication, says David H. Well, yes and no. I mentioned the medication thing, but, you know, people need to be maybe a little bit more aware of whether or not there is alcohol in medication because, you know, a couple of good glugs of cough syrup, if that genuinely puts you over the limit, then, you know, it's obviously a concern, isn't it? It's not drink driving that'll kill the pubs, it's the smoking ban and the pure greed of the brewery that'll finish them off, says Frank. Okay, how about all these people driving around high as kites on drugs? Who tests them? I believe that there are tests if somebody is thought to be driving under the influence of drugs, and I think that the penalties are much the same. I know quite a few people who live in Scotland. They don't go out to pubs much now. They used to, but they just don't go out anymore. It's too risky, and it's not that they used to drink and drive. They just had a couple of shandies with a meal, but they've taken all the fun out of it. In the Isle of Man, there are pubs and restaurants who make the money out of selling pub grub. You've got to look at the knock-on effect on the economy, and the economy here is going through a bad time. Years ago, the island didn't have a drink-drive limit, and now they want this. Leave it alone. Right. I'd never dream of drink driving. I like my beer too much to spill any, says Steve.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who took part in the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the programme yourself, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can share your thoughts on the Facebook page. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of the Manx Radio website, and manxradio.com's also where you'll get an update of what's being discussed on the programme each day. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, why not suggest it by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com. Love being Shaw. Terms and conditions apply.